Okay, so what we have today is the Pythagorean theorem. So we're going to be able to use the Pythagorean theorem to solve problems. The Pythagorean theorem is probably the most famous mathematical relationship. It states that in a triangle, well, in a right triangle specifically, the sum of the square, which means we're multiplying it by itself, of the legs is equal to the square of the hypotenuse. Okay, and so we should know what these things mean, the legs and the hypotenuse. So when we're given a right triangle, we have a leg here, we have a leg here, and we have the hypotenuse. It's always across from the right angle. And what the Pythagorean theorem says is that the two legs, A and B, squared is going to equal the square of that hypotenuse. So we can say A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And that's really, this is the craziness of the Pythagorean theorem. That's the important part. And then as well as knowing where these side lengths go. So knowing where they go is important, and the letters are just arbitrarily picked at the beginning of the alphabet. So even if we have these two sides, the hypotenuse is always going to be C, and it's across from that right angle. And then it doesn't really matter. You can put A and B here. When we have our triangle flipped, across from that right angle is always going to be C. And then it doesn't really matter where we put A and B, because we're still going to have A squared plus B squared equal to C squared for all of our right triangles. All of our right triangles. So let's see what we can do to try to solve for some of these sides. So on the back page, you have example 1. It says, use the Pythagorean theorem to find the value of x. Now, the first thing that I want to do is name all the sides, A, B, and C from what I know. These two should always be the legs, and this one should always be that hypotenuse. So I have A, B, and C, and I want to use the Pythagorean theorem, which is going to be A squared plus B squared equal to C squared. And then I want to plug them in. So in this case here, I have 4 as A, so 4 squared plus 3 squared, and then I'm looking for C squared. Now 4 squared is going to give me 16, plus 3 squared is going to give me 9, equal to C squared. And I have 16 plus 9, which is 25, equal to C squared. Now what we must remember here is how to find this. How do we get C squared? We want to think about what number times itself equals 25. Okay. We also want to be thinking about, if we don't know that, we want to be taking the square root. Okay, and that the square root is going to always have a positive and negative answer, but since we're talking about length, we only want the positive one. So since we're talking about length, we only want that positive one. So if I take the square root of both sides, or I think about what times what is going to give me 25, I can see that C is going to equal 5, and negative 5 is also going to equal C, but we don't want to use that one because we want an actual length. for this one here. So even though it says x, okay, in this case, we're going to have x equal to 5 or c equal to 5. Okay. Number 2 is very similar. I want to start by naming my sides, a, b, and c. And if I write out a squared plus b squared equals c squared, I see that I have a is x squared, b is 6 squared, and c is 9 squared. This is just going to leave me still with x squared, or you can leave this as a plus 36 equals 81. And I want to get this x by itself, so I'm going to subtract 36 on both sides. I get x squared equal to, I want to make sure I do it correctly, 45. And then you want to take the square root. This you may need a calculator for. Square root of both sides gives me x equal to about 6.71 or negative 6.71, and I only want the positive one. So this would then be my answer for that third side. And notice it doesn't always come out equally. You want to go 2 decimal places here to give yourself some accuracy. And the last one, again, name the sides a, b, and c. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. 8 is what I have for a, x is what I have for b, and 12 for c. So 64 plus x squared equals 144. These ones are a bit more difficult when we're just solving for the hypotenuse. In the first one, a little bit easier. This one you got to do some extra work, some more subtraction here to get those values before you can take that square root. In this I get 80, which means I'm looking to take the square root of both of these. It's not going to be even. It's going to be about almost 9. Not quite there. Remember, you have 2 answers. We only want that positive one since we're talking about a length. Okay? Only the positive because it's a length. Otherwise, you would give both answers. Okay? So you have some classwork to do attached with this. I'm finding some more of the sides.